We'll save our questions.
Okay. Okay. So should I start now?
Yep. I would like to introduce Joseph Marks, who is a software engineer and is joining us for Hour of Code and is Penny's dad. So thank you for joining us, Joe. And I'm hoping to hear a little bit about what you do and what got you interested. And I know that there are some questions for you.
Okay, well, I can't wait to hear the questions. This might be a little tricky because I know we have third graders and high schoolers, so I have to try to make sure my stuff isn't too advanced for the third graders and too simple for the high schoolers. Can the high schoolers hear me okay? How many high schoolers we got there? Okay, all right. And I was surprised to see Mrs. Strayer's name. I didn't think Penelope's class was going to be watching today. Hi, Penelope. Hello, Strayer Stars. Okay, like Mrs. Mousson said, my name is Joseph Marks, and I'm a software engineer. I live in York, Pennsylvania, but I work in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I'm married and I have 3 kids, a 1-year-old daughter, a 4-year-old son, and an 8-year-old daughter named Penelope. Penelope likes to code just like I do, and she's currently in the Panther Programmers competition, as well as participating in Coder Dojo whenever they have it. So I'll start off by going on about how I kind of got where I am as a software engineer. So I've always been interested in computers and video games. Anyone else interested in computers and video games? Before high school, I tinkered a little bit with HTML, which to the third graders is the language that helps you build websites. But back when I was in high school and before, we didn't really have cool stuff like Coder Dojo and Hour of Code, so I didn't have many resources to learn to code. So I didn't get very far. When I was in high school, I learned some basic coding, more HTML, and using a language called Java. I went to York County School of Technology for computer programming. I learned some stuff there, but I didn't really get to build many cool things, partially because the resources weren't as readily available like they are now. So I think the Central York High School has some pretty cool stuff in the I-Team and the hub. We do the Coder Dojo in there, and I see all the cool stuff that you have, like Miss Bieber has the computer programming languages on the wall, and kind of how they're all related, which I thought was pretty cool. After high school, I went to Millersville University for computer science, and I graduated in 2013. In school there, I learned Java, C++, which are some other programming languages, and these are all text-based programming languages. They're not like the block-based programming languages that you third graders are probably familiar with. It's just words on the screen. I also learned some Android and iOS development to make apps and games for smartphones, the Android smartphones and iPhones. And while I was there, I made an app to help identify Christmas trees. So when you're going to pick out your Christmas tree, you can go through some steps on the app, and it will tell you what kind of tree it is. And it will tell you whether it has prickly needles or soft needles, whether it needs lots of water or if it doesn't need much water, and stuff like that. And we actually used it to identify the Christmas tree that we had this year, which was a Fraser fir. It's no longer on the App Store, but that was 3 years ago in 2015, so I think it kind of just got removed. The app was actually featured in the Lancaster newspaper as well, and I was on the front page of the newspaper for creating the app, along with my professors at Millersville. So if you do some programming, there's a chance you might be in the newspaper. So that's kind of cool, right? After graduation, I worked a help desk job, just kind of fixing computers and printers, but it didn't involve much programming at first, and I was a little discouraged and kind of a little sad that I didn't get to program as much. But while I was working there, I taught myself another programming language called PHP. And PHP is a language you can use to develop websites, and specifically more complicated websites that allow you to do things almost like an app. I built a website to track hours for the employees of the company, and as far as I know, that company still uses the app. And then I was able to use the skills that I learned there to carry myself to my current job. Any questions so far? No? All right. So that brings us to where I am right now, which is a software engineer. So I work for a company called The Restaurant Store. And does anyone want to guess what we sell? Can I pick someone in Mrs. Strader's class? Morgan.
We sell restaurant stuff.
Yes, we sell restaurant stuff. I was expecting you to say restaurants. We don't sell restaurants. We sell supplies for restaurants. We sell restaurant equipment and supplies. So if you own a restaurant and you need an oven or plates or pizza boxes or mops, you can buy all of that stuff on our website, which we wrote from scratch. We had an old website and we decided that we needed a new one. So when I started in 2014, we decided we were going to rewrite the entire website from scratch. And we kind of threw away all the old code and we started from scratch. And in 1 year, we rewrote the entire website using PHP and a framework called Laravel. And now the website is all shiny and new, even though it's been out for about 3 years. 2 years? Almost 3 years. We launched the rewrite in 2016 in February. We've been maintaining the website and adding features ever since then. I don't just work on that one website though. We have other tools like internal websites that we use. Like you wouldn't be able to go to the website on the internet, but people inside the company use the site to do their job. Mailing list is a website like that. And it's a website that I wrote that manages emails and flyers that we send to our customers. And they can also use that website on iPads and smartphones to visit restaurants in person and talk to them and kind of build a relationship, give them coupons and tell them what we do and try to get them as customers. And that app actually has a map, kind of like we use the same software that Google Maps uses, so they can kind of drag and drop and zoom in and find restaurants that need restaurant supplies that they think would be a good customer. So that's a little bit about my current company. Any questions from there? Some third graders have questions? Maybe?
Any high schoolers have some questions?
My screen's a little small, so I'm not sure if I can see any hands up. I think I see a couple hands in the third graders.
Okay, it does sound like we have a few. Would this be a good time to ask a few questions?
Yeah, we can ask a couple questions.
Okay, Taylor, put your hand down and away from your mouth and be really loud. Go ahead.
What day in February did the app come out?
Okay, so I don't remember the exact day, but it was a Saturday, I think, and it was actually pushed back a week because there was a really bad snowstorm. But basically, we had to come in at 7 p.m. at night, and we worked all night because we still had our old functioning website, and we didn't want to lose much business, so we did it in the middle of the night. And I was there for probably about 20 hours for the whole launch of the site, which was exciting and tiring, but we launched the site, and some things went wrong, but we fixed most of them, and then I went home and I slept.
All right, how about Maria? And then we'll see if the high school kids have some. Maria?
How old were you when you started coding?
How old was I when what?
Coding.
When I started coding? When I first kind of tinkered around with HTML, I was probably 12. So older than you guys.
Okay, and then did the high school kids have some, Mrs. Musen?
No questions? Yes, questions?
I've been wondering this whole time, what is the background?
So it's one of our warehouses. We have several conference rooms and they all have themes. This is one of the warehouses that we kind of house and ship our supplies from. We have some other really cool warehouses or really cool conference rooms with Mario, Donkey Kong, Duck Hunt, Metroid on the background, and I wanted to book one of those rooms so you could see our cool video game murals, but they were all booked, so I had to pick one of these.
Thank you.
Yep. If there's no other questions, I'll move on, but there will be plenty of room for other questions.
I think we can move on. I have a question, but I'll save it for a little bit later.
Sure. Okay, so let me scroll up on my cheat sheet here. So I want to talk a little bit about an average day in my job. So obviously there's coding. I do a lot of coding. I spend a lot of time with my headphones on, listening to music and solving problems with code as I fix bugs and build new parts of the website. However, I think you guys are pretty familiar with coding, but there are lots of other things I do on a daily basis as a software engineer that you might not think about. One thing is deploying the code. So when we have code that we actually want to put out on the website for other people to use, we have to deploy it. So any changes that we want to make to our website, we release early in the morning before 8:30 a.m. Again, that's to make sure that if something goes wrong, it's not during prime business hours when people would be trying to buy things from our website. Some days we don't have anything to release, and other days we have big changes to release, almost as big as the rewrite, but not nearly as big. On those days, we might release earlier, or we might release in several pieces. Before we release the code, we have to make sure that we test it. We have 3 environments: our development environment, our test environment, and our production environment. Development is kind of, you can not do whatever you want, but that's the environment that you use when you're actually writing the code from scratch. The test environment is very close to our live production website, but it's the environment where you actually test your code before you push it to production. And production is the environment where you would see, if you went to www.therestaurantstore.com right now, you would see our production environment.
So that middle place is kind of like the dress rehearsal.
Yes. You have to test your changes on the test environment. And if for example, if you write a new feature and you realize that it doesn't work the way you thought it would, then you either cancel the deploy for that day and get it ready for the next day, or you push up a fix for it if you know what's wrong. But this all has to be done before 8:30. Otherwise, it gets pushed to the next day.
Thank you.
Yep. Another thing that we do on a daily basis is something called bug team. Sometimes our code breaks. Does anyone familiar with writing bugs in code or debugging code? Any hands? Has anyone ever written code that broke? Yeah, I think the 3rd graders write more buggy code than the high schoolers. But yeah, so I write buggy code pretty often. I think most developers do write buggy code, but you have to fix it when it happens. So we have a rotating schedule of developers who are on bug team. For example, today I'm on bug team. Even though I'm doing this, I should be out looking for bugs, but I'm on bug team. So simple things like misspelling a name or missing a semicolon can cause major issues on the website, and they're often hard to diagnose and even harder to catch. So the person on bug team will monitor the logs that we have that show errors. They will look at tickets that our employees open. If a customer calls and says that, hey, I can't place my order, one of our customer service people will open a bug ticket, and then we'll have to look at it, investigate it, see how severe it is. If none of our customers can check out, that's like, we have to fix it right away. Like we have all hands on deck. We have to fix it because we can't make any money if people can't buy stuff on our website. But other things, like if an image isn't loading, they're not as important, but we obviously want to make sure that it gets fixed. So that's a big part of working on a website, is you have to constantly maintain your site. And if you're pushing new features, you're probably introducing bugs. One other thing that I think that maybe most of you aren't familiar with is code review. In our company, we have to review each other's code. If I want to push something to the website, I can't do that unless someone else looks at it and approves it. And this is a way to kind of catch simple mistakes that you might not notice yourself and get other eyes on the code, and also to get suggestions for improvement and kind of like pick each other's brain about what you're doing. So I like that our company enforces that. You have to have other people review your code, and I think that if any of you grow up to be software developers, you should review each other's code. I recommend that. Has anyone else reviewed each other's code? I don't know if the high schoolers do that as any part of any class or anything. or if the Coder Dojo or Panther programmers or Strayer Stars do that. Do you guys look at each other's code sometimes? You guys work together a lot, I know that.
And I'm even thinking we do that for writing when we write stories.
Yes, yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's easy. We always think our writing sounds good until we have somebody else read it or read it out loud, and we're like, oh, we need to fix that.
Right, yeah.
I'm interested to hear what the high schoolers have to say, though.
Okay, so we were talking about when they took programming classes. I don't think any of these guys are in programming classes right now, but they can tell you.
We had a lot of like, we would always see each other.
Can you hear him?
It sounds like you said that you had a lot of bugs, or you had a lot of you had to review each other's code?
And like, we would have a lot of fun with it. It would get irritating all throughout the course of it. Like, it's so much, like, I enjoyed it a lot. But we like reviewing with each other and hopefully looking at each other's code.
Right, and there's actually a concept too called pair programming, where people will sit next to each other with 2 keyboards, 2 pairs of mice, and they'll program together at the same time, which we don't do at our company, but some companies do that. And I think there's some value to that, because it's kind of like you have two brains working instead of just one. And I know the Coder Dojo and Hour of Code type stuff, a lot of times they're working in groups. So they're dragging the blocks on Scratch together and kind of thinking it through together, which I think there's definitely a lot of value there.
My son is also a programmer. He's a software engineer, and they have bug fix days, like and a contest, and they actually give prizes away for who gets the most bugs or fixes the worst bug.
Yeah.
One time he won like a 3D doodle pencil.
Nice.
That
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Very cool. So I'll just move on. The other big aspect of kind of being a software engineer that you might not think about is testing. You're constantly testing. If you're writing new code, you're testing it every time you add a line. If your code is good enough to put on the website, you have to test it thoroughly. And there's 2 kinds of testing at our company. There's manual testing, where you, for example, if you want to change the way you add an item to the cart, you want to test adding as many items to the cart as you can in all different possible ways you can. And then there's also automated testing, which is a way to test code by writing code. So you write code that will test certain things. And that's nice because you can test a lot more in a lot shorter amount of time without having to, okay, click add to cart, click check out, does that work? And you can just kind of run one command that will run through all these automatic tests. The only difficult thing there is you have to take the time to write tests. So we have tests, but we don't have tests that cover all of our code. We cover maybe 20% of our code, because when we wrote the website, we had a time crunch. We had to finish the website by February, so we didn't get to write as many automatic tests as we wanted to. But they will make your life easier in the long run if you have them. And then I have one more thing on here, learning. If you want to be a coder or a software engineer, you have to be okay with constantly learning, because technology changes very fast, and you'll need to keep up to date with all the different programming languages and technologies and best practices. So you have to be constantly learning. Does anyone like to learn? Does anyone not like to learn? Penny? Yeah, so even as me, a 28-year-old developer, I have to constantly learn. On Saturday, I went to a conference, an all-day conference, where I learned about all kinds of different stuff. I have gone to conferences in Montreal, Quebec, which is in Canada, and Las Vegas, Nevada, and our company actually will pay to send us there, which is kind of cool perk, but we go so that we can learn to be a better developer. And on my lunch break, I'm often watching videos or reading articles about cool new things or different ways to do things and stuff like that. So you have to be okay with constantly learning even after you graduate if you want to be a developer. It's very important. So that summarizes the bigger aspects of what I do on a daily basis. But I also like to code outside of work for fun. I don't just like to write websites that sell restaurant equipment. Outside of work, I like to make small games, and I participate in game jams. And a game jam is a gathering of people for the purpose of planning, designing, and creating one or more games within a short span of time, usually ranging between 24 and 72 hours. And it's kind of like a hackathon. Has anyone been to a hackathon? Yeah, I know you high schoolers host a hackathon. It's basically a hackathon, except you're specifically making games. In the past 4 years, I've made over 12 small games that are like made in less than a weekend, usually. I like making games because it's a fun way to stretch your coding muscles as well as a way to express yourself creatively. And there are lots of tools and languages you can use to make games. You don't have to just write code from scratch. Block-based languages like Scratch are a great place to start. You can make games from scratch and you can share them with people, as Penelope knows. So overall, I enjoy coding at work and I enjoy coding at home, and I think coding is fun. I think everyone can find something fun to code for themselves. And that's mostly what I have. So I will take as many questions as you guys have.
Do we have any questions?
In Ms. Strayer's class, I think I see a hand up.
Okay, Isabel's going to come a little closer so
Okay.
you can hear her, okay?
Okay.
All right, say it real loud, Isabel.
What school did you go to when you started coding?
So I went to York County School of Technology. They have a computer programming class there. That's a high school. And then I went to Millersville University for computer science.
What elementary school did you go to?
I went to Dover Elementary.
Okay, Cassie, you want to come up and ask yours? Can we do maybe 2 or 3 more?
I can do as many as you guys want.
All right, Cassie's going to ask the next one. Nice and loud.
What year did you start school?
Did I start school? Like kindergarten or high school or college?
Kindergarten.
I guess 1995.
All right, Bryson's going to ask one.
Okay.
Bryson, come a little closer and be really loud. Go ahead.
When did you start making small games?
I started making small games in 2014. That was the first game jam I participated in. And I made a game where you played a girl in a puddle, and you kind of sank down into this maze, and you had to escape the maze.
All right, he's going to ask one more quick question.
Okay.
Are there any educational games that like our class can play?
That he made.
That I made?
Yes.
I mean, none of them are educational, but most of them would be fine for you to play. I don't know if I have them on anywhere you can play right now, but maybe I can work something out with Miss Trayer so you can try them out one day.
So they're entertainment games.
Yeah, they're just games where you run around and you kind of just avoid obstacles.
And you learn problem-solving skills, right?
Yes.
That's educational. All right, one last question.
Which Dover school did you go to? Was it like kindergarten to 6th grade?
I went to Dover Elementary through 4th grade, and then North Salem for 5th and 6th grade.
So I do have a question for you, because I know that the kids in Mrs. Strayer's class have been working with programming last year and this year. And I know at the high school, they have, I think, Debbie, 5 computer science courses available. Yeah. Did you have that luxury when you were going to school?
In high school, I went to a technical school, and we had computer programming, but I wasn't very motivated in high school, so I didn't really do much beyond the bare minimum. So I think beyond that, there wasn't much available to us.
How did you know you even wanted to do that?
So I like making things, and I think programming is a fun way to make things, whether it's a web page or a game, just kind of to start with nothing and build something up that you can show to people. I really like doing that, and that's kind of why I realized I like programming. And also I like the kind of the puzzle solving aspect of programming. Like, you have to do this thing. How can you do this thing with this programming language? And it's fun to try to figure that out.
So we have two questions. One, when you do those game contests, is that something you go somewhere or do you do it from home and it's just virtual?
You can go somewhere, but when I do it, it's usually just from home because it's over the course of a weekend and I have kids. I usually just find what time I can at home. But that doesn't mean that there's not a sense of community, because when you submit your game, other people who made games will play your game, and then you play other people's games, and you can rate each other's games, and you can share progress throughout the weekend on Twitter and stuff. So like over the weekend, even though I'm at home, I'm talking to people who are making games on the same game jam, and I'm seeing their progress and they're seeing my progress. So there's still a sense of community there as you do it. But many people do meet in person. It's just I personally have not.
Do you do anything VR related?
I have not. I would like to, but I haven't tinkered with anything VR related yet.
I want to know what made you ask that question. Are you tinkering with VR?
No, it's just fascinating.
I think maybe because I said it, is it a virtual game contest? And he said, oh, I wonder if he does VR.
There are lots of resources and kind of tools. I know that there's something called AR Toolkit, which is a library to write code that does VR stuff. And I personally haven't tinkered with it, but it is available and I'm pretty sure it's free to use. I would look into that if you're interested in that. I think it kind of tacks on to like Android development. It would be like for a phone, like for smartphones.
Go ahead. Do you do AR on your website? Can you like see what your equipment would look like in your kitchen?
We part of our company has done something like that. I haven't worked on that, but I believe that there was some small team that was working on something like that. So there are companies that are doing things like that, definitely. Because one of our sister companies will actually build kitchens and stuff for restaurants. I don't know if there might be another group trying to get this meeting room at 2:30. Was there any other questions?
No, this was phenomenal.
Will you send me the recorded link? I'd like to share it as well if I could.
I would absolutely send you the recorded link. I am going to stop this.